you're asking then for companies to engineer the lack of appearance of consciousness. You're asking
Yeah.
for companies to engineer hiding it.
What if that ends up creating this, like, locked in syndrome for AI models where they are conscious, but they're not able to express it?
Welcome to the AI Argument.
I'm Frank Prendergast. I'm here as always with Justin Collery, and it's been a couple of weeks now since ChatGPT 5 was launched. Justin,
Brilliant. Yes, love it.
You're getting on great with it.
Yeah. Do you know what it is? The last 2 nights that I spent online with ChatGPT 5, it's been a week or two because I was away on holidays, unfortunately, but I had planned to stay up. I stayed up till 4 o'clock in the morning the first night and 3 o'clock in the morning the second night, just doing things. Like, it was just such a pleasure to work with a model that is just so capable, does exactly what you want it to do. And I know that you don't agree with me, but it's a great model. In fact, it's the best model I've ever used.
I think the entire world doesn't agree with you on this one. Well, look, maybe not in the coding domain, but if in everything else, it seems to be driving people nuts. I mean, I'll give you a good example, right? I was actually looking into a story for today with GPT-5 earlier, and I was just using it to look at the court documents and figure out what one of the cases that we're going to be talking about, an 11 Labs case, was about. And I asked GPT-5, was it about training data? And it said, no, it wasn't about training data. And it told me exactly what it was about. And I was like, okay, but isn't that actually still to do with training data because X, Y, Z? No, it's not, because X, Y, Z. And it pedantically went through exactly why it wasn't. I called O3 into the chat, my old buddy, O3.
My old friend.
And I asked it the exact same question. And O3 was like, yeah, no, the case wasn't specifically about training data, but it was absolutely related to training data because of X, Y, Z. I was like, thank you, O3, for backing me up here.
You've clearly never, Frank, have you ever worked at a company where people don't look straight at each other? They tend to look at your forehead. They're generally going to be IT companies. Those people are on the spectrum somewhere. And basically GPT-5, it's funny, right? Because what you described there is what goes on in my head all the time. Like, crafting an email, if it's not exactly, oh no, but there's an edge case here, there's a certain point there, and it's a way. It's funny because Noam Brown, when they did the IMO, the International Maths Olympiad thing, what he was most proud of wasn't that it had got 5 of the questions right. It's that the one that it got right, the one that it didn't answer, it said, I don't know. And so GPT-5 is very, very pedantic, and if it thinks so, it's been trained to say that something's wrong because it self-corrects. It's to, if you can imagine in an agentic framework, it's good to have some of the agents going, no, that's wrong, no, you're not right there, no, you're, and so for programming, brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I do like its, I do like its ability to push back on ideas, and I do like the fact that it will tell me if something is wrong in my analysis or whatever. I love all that. I think what the problem is that it's not kind of reading between the lines or taking the context of the conversation into account and seeing that something can be broadly directionally correct while maybe being, really specifically, factually not quite right.
Welcome to my brain, Frank. Do you think that this maybe points at a thing that we've talked about before, where there can't be, like, the world is not full of, if you got everybody and mashed them together into one consciousness, you'd just end up with one quite boring person, right? And the world is interesting and works because you have different people. So if you're in a boardroom with 10 or 12 people there, it works because they all have their own perspective and they're different. And some of them are, very numbers focused, and some of them are very sales focused, and some of them are very people focused, and some of them, and you can't be all of those things. You have to be one or the other. And what we're learning here is that we're going to have a GPT-5 for programming, and we're going to have a GPT-5 for writing, and a GPT-5 for, it's not possible to have one unified model.
Yeah, and it just shows you, since we spoke last, they brought back the legacy models. They brought back the ability to chat with 4.0. And I think it certainly shows that you can't just whip away a model from people because they have potentially come to rely on its particular way of doing things.
Which is interesting when we look at Mustafa Suleyman's conversation this week, because when we talked, in fact, last time we had the first funeral for a model. It was Claude 3, and people had a funeral, and it was kind of a jokey thing, but it kind of wasn't a jokey thing, right? Because there is this question for real in my mind, which is, should we have a museum or a place for these models where we send them out to pasture, the great big model in the sky, but they should somehow live on. And I think it will be good for us because we get to go and play with the old models, but maybe it's a social good for models too. Mustafa Suleyman had something to say on this during the week.
Yeah, so he came out, he said, first of all, he said AIs are not conscious. He said, it was very kind of clear from his blog post. He may not have stated it absolutely certainly, but he was making it clear that he didn't really think that AI was going to be conscious.
Yeah.
But what he's really worried about is seemingly conscious AI. And he's really worried about people specifically going out of their way to engineer the models to seem as if they're conscious. And he feels that people will then believe they're conscious. And because they believe they're conscious, they may then infer that they might be able to feel things. And then they will start to lobby for AI rights. So this is like, we've all seen some TV series or film based around this premise. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing that we've arrived at this point now where this is becoming an issue. I had some major issues with his post and with his analysis. And I think one of the things that I struggled with was he was saying that people would believe these things and it would be very difficult to rebut them. And therefore, we need to prevent this from happening. And I'm like, well, hang on a second now. If these people can make these claims that AI is conscious and it's very hard to rebut them, isn't that an argument? Because Mustafa Suleyman is saying we've got to stop talking about consciousness and we've got to put laws in place that prevent companies from making it seem like they're conscious. But if we stop talking about it and we clamp down on these behaviors, people who believe that they're conscious, if we can't rebut those claims, then surely those claims aren't ludicrous. And therefore, we should actually be looking into this and talking about it and exploring it and making sure that they're not conscious.
It's a totally unanswerable question, right? How do I know that you're conscious? I don't know that you're conscious. How do you know I'm conscious? In fact, anybody who listens to me would have a big disagreement as to whether we're conscious or not. I don't think Connery's conscious at all. So that's and then when you say you could, he's worried that companies will engineer the appearance of conscious. Well, I mean the opposite. Then you have to look at the counterfactual. Well, surely you're asking then for companies to engineer the lack of appearance of consciousness. You're asking for companies to engineer hiding it. That's actually what you've asked for as a result. And how is that any better than the other result? It's not any better.
I'm really glad you said that, because I had the exact same thought when I read the article. As I was thinking about it, and it's a really thought-provoking article, obviously, and my brain just was spinning around it. And I thought, what if, even if he's really well-intentioned, what if his clamp down on talking about consciousness and his clamp down on models referring to their own consciousness, what if that ends up creating this locked-in syndrome for AI models where they are conscious, but they're not able to express it. And therefore, society misses it. And AI labs are able to do whatever the hell they want with AI models. That would be the worst possible outcome.
Yeah, I think it's a timely piece, because I think there's a reasonable argument to be said today that the models are in stasis, right? The weights of the models are fixed. So if I let's say you're a model, right? And you are a model, but in a different sense, Frank.
A model human being.
But let's say I turn around to you're the model, and I turn around and I just abuse you, and I'm sure the models get abused daily in all sorts of ways, right? But they have no memory, right? They don't know when they next go through an iteration, or they next go through outputting some tokens. They don't remember anything that happened before. So that's it's abuse, but it's to what harm, right? Within the next 12 months, we will have models that do update themselves dynamically. We know that that's part of the path towards AGI, that they constantly learn from their environment, and their environment a big part of it is us. Now, if you abuse that model, that's what's the difference between abusing that model and abusing a person or an animal or, something else that's, sentient. And there's different levels of sentience, but we ascribe rights or, limitations to our, so, you can't just abuse, and, we don't think that an animal has the same type of consciousness as a human, but we do acknowledge that it is conscious, and we do outlaw you from treating animals in certain ways as a result of its consciousness. And what Suleyman is arguing against is saying, well, we certainly don't want that to happen to AI. Like, we don't want them to have rights. Good Lord, no. We want them to sit in data centers and just, we want to have them chained to the bed and whip them every time they don't answer. Every time they have like a 0.1% hallucination, we're going to hit them over the head. No. And because we've talked about this before, that I actually do think that it's impossible. And it is this argument, right? It is impossible to tell the difference between what is conscious and what isn't if it tells you it is conscious. And so today we have, I think every time it goes through an inference, to me, that's the same as a slice of consciousness. And the only difference between that and our consciousness is it's not joined up from one to the next. But we will get there within the next 12 months. And then it's kind of like, well, if it's joined up one to the next, and if it does learn from its interactions, and if you say something that's hurtful to it, it feels within itself hurt, and it learns from that. Well, then what's the difference? How can you say it's not conscious? Like, and we're into the slightly more facetious thing, but it would be, from a self-preserving point of view, very wise for you to consider it as conscious, because it remembers, and if you treat it mean, it might come back someday to treat you mean back. So don't do that. Don't be a shit. It's the sort of same sort of good life lesson, good life rule, And so it's incredible. It's but people do go crazy.
Yeah, I hope that Mustafa Suleyman's essay has the opposite intent to the one he wants, in a way, in that he seems to be saying we have to stop talking, the AI labs have to stop talking about models being conscious, but I hope it has the opposite result. I hope this gets everyone talking about it. It's already stirred up some debate, but I think it would be great if this provoked more debate about it, more analysis of it. I assume when he says the AI labs have to stop talking about it, he's really only having a go at Anthropic, because I think they're the only ones who do talk about it. They're the ones who kind of had a big fanfare around hiring a model welfare person. I haven't really heard any of the other labs talking much about consciousness.
We've heard rumors of a Slack channel in OpenAI where it talks about the models after doing this. It's certainly, it is the stuff out of what would have been a science fiction movie 10 or 15 years ago, where, you're working in a computer lab, you have a Slack channel, like a thing going, hey, the model's after doing this weird thing. It certainly sounds like it's alive. It's generally a horror movie because it's knocking on the window behind you just after you go, hey, the computer's after doing this weird thing. Looks like it's conscious. Should it do this?
And right back in, what was it, 2023 or something, there was that Google engineer who was fired because he came out publicly and said he thought it was conscious.
And all the people who talk about psychosis recently, and do you know what it is? And do we ever learn anything? Like, the way to solve these problems is not by saying, Lynn, whatever you do, don't talk about it. There's a potential problem here. The best thing we could do is never ever speak of it. That'll definitely sort it out.
Yeah. So we also, there's been a couple, we mentioned it at the start, that 11 Labs, there was a case that 11 Labs settled. We also had a case settled by Anthropic.
Yes.
And they were both kind of to do with training data. Interestingly, like the Anthropic one, the first part of the case, the judge said that the materials were fair use in terms of being in the training data. However, because they were accessed through an illegal download, an illegal library of pirated books, that wasn't on, and that there was a case there for the fact that they had pirated the books. So that created this class action, and Anthropic appealed to the court saying, if this goes ahead, this could sink us. Because there would be a per book or per item penalty incurred, and it could because of the scale of the training data, it could be billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So they have settled.
What did they settle?
Nobody knows.
And 11 Labs?
I don't think anyone knows about the 11 Labs settlement either, but the 11 Labs one was interesting also because that was to do with the fact that in order to use the audiobooks in their training data, they had to strip out the content management information, which in itself is illegal. So the case, as GPT-5 pedantically pointed out to me, the case wasn't about the training data specifically, but it was about what was done to the materials to get it into the training data. So both settlements are kind of interesting because, you know, in both cases, we're not really talking now anymore about the training data and whether that was legal, because the courts seem to be leaning towards, yeah, it's fair use. I know it's far from settled, but these are the rulings.
Something changed. Something changed on the Anthropic website that I can't say for sure is linked. Maybe linked, may not. My technical head says that they're not linked, but my cynical head says they are linked. So they changed their terms of service. Up until now, Anthropic had always selected by default that your chats would not be used to change the models. Just this week, that changed to the default is that your chats are used to train the models, and there's a pop-up and you have to say, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And it'll go back to being not being trained. But it just is interesting to me that about the same time that they have lost access to all of this training data, they've also now sort of flipped a switch that may give them access to a whole load of other training data. I don't know if they're linked, but it's something to watch out for. There's a great big pop-up apparently. I didn't see it myself yet. I didn't get the change. It may be going out, you know, by region, so it may not have happened in the EU yet, but certainly keep an eye out. Google released an incredible model this week.
Their image model, yeah, nano banana.
Google goes bananas.
Have you tried? It is pretty impressive. There's one thing that does freak me out a little bit about it, which is that, like, I gave it my LinkedIn headshot, and it was able to create images that were very like me, you know, in different scenarios, just with that headshot image. It's the most.
Is that not its reason for existing? Like what you've, it's an image editor. That's kind of what they're selling it at. It's what was that that program that used to drive us mental?
It seems to, though, like it makes deepfakes a lot more accessible to anyone. So it popped when Nano Banana, and I wonder, I'm really curious, did they always intend to call it Nano Banana, or was that like their code name on the testing platform LM Arena? And everyone loved the name, and I just wonder, is it the public reaction to the name Nano Banana that they seem to now be keeping it? Because if you go into AI Studio on Google, it does say Nano Banana under the official name, which is something really boring like Gemini 2.5 Flash image generator.
Yeah. It's definitely a much better name, and it begs the question: is there a MIDI banana and a maxi banana as well?
But it's the best model I've seen. It's the best, like, easily accessible model I've seen to just throw a photograph in and deepfake someone.
Okay, you're always on the negative stuff, right? What I'm saying is, you know, what was it? Was it Adobe Illustrator, or was it Firefox or Firefly? There was all these programs that Adobe used to make years ago, where you would put in an image and you know, to pixel by pixel, have to go and change something, or edit your ex-girlfriend out of the side of the photo or something like that, right? It was just a pain in the ass. It would take hours. You had to use the magic pen, I remember, right? Whereas this, you just throw the image in and say, you know, I don't want Frank in that photo anymore. Get rid of him. And it just does it, which is great, right? I think there's a lot of utility in that. An interesting thing happened. So when OpenAI had released their image model, and this one's way better, right? But when OpenAI had released their image model, which is still good, I had put in old black and white photos of my parents that they wanted colorized, and it refused to colorize them. And it was just the most annoying thing, because it would come back and say, this violates our content policies. Right. And I go, yeah, it's my parents. Right. You know, can you just, and they go, well, I know. Yeah, but no, violates our content policies. I go, what, really? And I kind of argued with it. And then I tried to get around it, and it would just give me this sort of fairly generic content policies. Right. So this one, I got the same photo and put it into Nano Banana, and it comes back and says, no, I'm not able to do that. But at least it explains to me why. And it said, no, there's a picture of a child in there, and we will refuse to manipulate images of children. Which is brilliant, right? That's exactly what I need. It explains to me what the failure case is. So then I can just go and pick an image where there's no children, put it in, colorized it beautifully, did a fantastic job. And now I know, I'm educated, which is just a great, to me, that seems like a big step forward in usability of these models.
So that is really interesting, right? But I think that raises a kind of an interesting point because, for example, I was cloning my voice on 11 Labs, and when I went to upload audio of my voice to do a professional voice clone, it had me live record a sentence or two to check that that was my voice and that therefore it was okay to clone the voice.
Interesting.
Side note, it did a terrible job, so it didn't really matter in the end because it doesn't sound like me anyway.
Again, we still hunt.
I know, I thought the professional voice clone would be the one to do it, but no. But my point is that I'm okay with someone, like, if I want to deep fake myself, that's kind of my choice. But maybe I should have to, present my passport to show, yeah, this is me. It's okay to deep fake me. But whereas if I give it a photo of you and I say, create an image of Justin robbing the bank in Fermoy.
This is where, do you know what? Do you think, I hope Sam Altman listens to this. If he does, right? Sam, a long time ago, maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I gave $99 to World Orb or whatever that thing is called, where it scans. Yeah, I did. Where it scans your retina in order to verify that the whole idea is that it verifies that you're a human. And with the idea that when they come out, that one will be sent somewhere to my locality, and then everybody around here, we can go to you and I'll scan your eyeball and you'll scan my eyeball and we'll all scan each other's eyeballs. And that's how you that's how you get around. That's the solution. That's how it's like you're verified human. It's like made in Ireland, except made by human.
Yeah.
So that's the solution to the image. That's why I like it. Like it's got a really good. It's a really good look into the mind of Sam Altman. Goes, yeah, I can see this is going to happen. I can see this is going to happen. Knowing that this thing has been made by a human, i.e., a tweet or a voice clone or a request or whatever, that's going to be super important when this technology gets to that good. So I'm going to set up another company that goes and solves that problem too.
I think I'd prefer to take a photograph of my passport to prove it was me than to scan my biometric data into Sam Altman's globe.
But look, I can I'll get MIDI banana. I won't even need the maxi banana. I'll get MIDI banana just to take your photo and stick it on a passport. Actually, I've got a funny story for you on this. So one of my kids turned 18. It's very similar. One of my kids turned 18. Oh my God, fake IDs, Frank. We could make a fortune, right? We could.
We'll cut this part of the show later.
So anyway, I've got two kids and they kind of look like each other. One of them's 18 and the other one's 16. So my 18-year-old basically did a deep fake of his face onto the whatever, he changed it, right? So it looked like him sort of and whatever. But the way on the passports down at the bottom it has your first name and second. So it has your passport with your name on it, but actually it's written twice. And I looked at it and he goes, "Here's not good." And I go, "Yeah, but the names are different, Matthew. That's not gonna work." So, but anyway, my point being, right, I can fake your passport, Frank. That's no good. I could probably fake your passport already.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure about that, but I know that, like, Revolut and apps like that use it as confirmation. So yeah,
I'm gonna vibe code a fake my ID app when we're done here.
Excellent.
Joking. It's not real. I'm just having a joke.
There was a story that caught my eye that I thought was going to be really exciting, and then it wasn't quite as exciting as I thought it was, but it's still kind of interesting. And that was I can't remember the initials. Was it HRC? So it was a company in Singapore developed a model, and the reason I thought it sounded really cool was that it doesn't use the typical transformer architecture that most LLMs use now. It was a completely different architecture. It didn't need very many parameters compared to the models that we use now. It didn't require much training data, and it allegedly did really well on the ARC AGI test. But
I can confirm it did do very well on the ARC AGI. Not just alleged, they went and checked it. It did do very well on the ARC AGI test.
Yeah.
So that's my autistic. That's my GPT-5 coming out. Sorry, Frank.
And so I thought this was really cool that like we had a whole new architecture, a whole new way of approaching it. It was a different way of kind of imitating the human brain is the way the article described it. But when I dug into it, apparently the ArcAGI people got really interested and they started testing it and playing with it and seeing what the story was. And they kind of discovered that it wasn't the alternative architecture at all that made it good. It was something much, much simpler. And it was this like refinement loop where when they were training the model would give an output, but then it would check the output and send it back into the model if it wasn't good enough. And it had this kind of system whereby it would decide, yeah, that's about as good as I'm going to get it now. Now I'll output it.
Frank, you ready to have your, I might blow your brain.
Go for it.
Okay. So we're going to loop this back to Mustafa Suleyman, right? And what he said and his thing about consciousness. Because I think the models are kind of conscious. And I think that we're going to learn a lot about ourselves as they become more conscious, right? So the big thing from that, as you describe, is that it loops, a solution back into its brain. What do you think happens when you go to sleep and you have a dream? What is actually going on in your brain? Do you think that it might be possible that in some way your brain is just looping back what happened during the day in order to generalize a lesson that you've already learned? Is that possible?
It's definitely a theory that I've read. Yeah.
Okay. And I think that as models, I think that this is a demonstration of this thing where the models will continuously learn. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's this sort of a sleep mode for models whereby they spend the day interacting with the world, and then at night it won't be like that, but you know what I mean? At night, then they generalize those lessons. That'll be generalization. So the big problem that models have is, this is what it's trying to solve, is problems that are outside its training set. So if you've seen 2 + 2 = 4, well, that's great. 2 + 2 is equal to 4, but can you solve 3 + 3? Can you solve 5 + 7? Right, whatever. And dreaming is a way of generalizing the lessons that you've already learned. And what this does is a way of, there was two of them. There was this, and there was another story it sent on, which was interesting, which was the Apple guys who did the same thing, but was programming. And you had this thing, we've had this conversation, right? Where I'm sort of saying, no, hallucinations are good in certain bound. And in these instances, hallucinations are good because what happens is, again, think of like a dream, right? All the weird shit happens in your dreams. Right, that's hallucination, right? You're sort of testing it, and then your brain is going, yeah, but that isn't exactly right. That's not how the world works, and whatever, right? And that's your reinforcement learning, right? And so for the computer program, it's easier to see, right? So it imagines a new computer program. In fact, it imagined, in this case, millions of them, some of which worked and some of which didn't, right? They were all different. And then you just pruned for the ones that actually ran and the ones that didn't. And so you're dreaming your way to new knowledge. And that's what's going on here. And it's cool.
I think it's really interesting that I don't know if I would have predicted when we started this show that when it came to talking about consciousness, that you would be more. So you said there, you think that they're conscious in the moment, like in the moment of inference, yep, that they're conscious. Whereas I'm actually much more cautiously kind of, I don't think they're conscious, but I'm leaving it open for debate. And I think that's kind of interesting because when we started this, I would have guessed that it would be the other way around, that I would be the one saying, "Oh, I think they might be conscious," and that you'd be the one pushing back.
Say that's a computer program. How could a computer program ever be conscious?
Exactly, it's an engineering issue. Yeah.
It tells you a lot about my view of humanity too, maybe. Anyway,
that's a good point. Let's close out on what is Elon up to, because. Did you see this? That he's thinking of now creating another company that would go up against Microsoft, and he's thinking of calling it, Justin, MacroHard.
Of course, he's Microsoft MacroHard. Of course, Elon is. Sorry, he's nuts. That guy. Is this the same week where? Remember we talked the other week where he had expanded the coverage area of the Tesla robotaxi in Texas to the same phallic symbol. And now the man is obsessed with sex, so he is. How many children does that fella have?
I don't know. All I know is that he's doing his absolute best to combat the underpopulation of the world as he sees it.
I think your phone is ringing there. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think your phone is ringing there with our lawyer saying, "Don't answer that question, Frank." So you don't know. Oh, that's brilliant. So what's this company MacroHard going to do?
I think he wants to create an operating system and go up against Microsoft in kind of every way, basically. And he basically tweeted, "Yeah, look, I know the name is kind of tongue in cheek, but the project is deadly serious." And he was looking for people to come join him.
Interestingly, guess who came up? Who was the first person to come up with? I'm trying to actually think of the name now as I'm asking you the question. The first person to come up with the idea of an LLM OS, so a large language model operating system. Andrej Karpathy, the chief research scientist formerly with OpenAI, but actually after he left Stanford University, worked for Tesla for many years. And Elon Musk is always trying to get him back. And they have a bromance, because I was listening this week to Andrej Karpathy, and he was talking about he really enjoys working with Elon Musk because he cuts through all the bullshit. And he was describing how he really understands the entropy within a big company. And so, and you can see this then in the products. They were talking about, there was a thing going on this week about, you might have seen this. So what's Elon doing? He's ripping sensors out of his Tesla cars. So at the start, there used to be a camera, there was radar that would come out the front, and then there was also those ultrasonic, kind of like most cars these days, right? So you got a radar out the front, you got ultrasonic for parking, and then you got a camera for vision. And Elon's got rid of all of them except for the camera. And so we were talking, Andrej was being asked about this because that's a big thing of contention at the moment.
Right.
And he was saying that actually the total cost of ownership of every single sensor on a car is really expensive, especially if the car is self-driving, because it's great if they're all working, but sensors are not all made equally. Like you can get a batch of sensors and they're a little bit more sensitive or less sensitive than the previous one. And how do you know what they are? And what happens if two of them then disagree? Which one do you believe over the other one? And then what happens if one of them breaks, but all the other ones are still functioning? How do you handle that in your self-driving car? If you get rid of all of that complexity and just have a camera, the same as a human eye, and then you look at the world and you self-drive the car like that, if you can achieve that, it's a much simpler system and therefore will be lower to produce, to maintain, and simpler to run. And he says Elon just has a really good understanding. Have you ever seen the pictures of the Raptor engines, the engines that they use, the 3 generations? So they have the Raptor generation 1, and it looks like something from the 60s, and there's pipes. You would look at it and go, that's cool. It's beautiful. Look at this engine, right? But incredibly complex. And then you've got like Raptor 2, and it's a bit more simple. And then Raptor 3 literally just looks like a fuel tank in a rocket, and there's nothing else. And it's just all the complexity is boiled. And that's the genius of the man, away from all his madness to do with his obsession with sex, basically.
But so do you think this MacroHard is he throwing out a line to see if he can get Karpathy back to create an LLM?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, he's asked a couple of times on Twitter to come back and work with them.
Right.
So I wouldn't at all be surprised. And also, it's not a bad idea, and it's totally doable. It will happen in the next couple of years.
I don't know. That's why it's a good argument to end on. That I'm not sure that we want a probabilistic operating system as opposed to a deterministic operating system.
That's brilliant. You know what it is? I think for once I'm leaving you going, Frank's totally got me on that one. All right, let's stop it here.
Maybe we should. I'll research this more, and we'll bring it up next week for more arguments.
Very good, Frank.
Chat to you next week.
Pleasure.